Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for Oxtails and Cocktails. This is our August edition, and we're so glad to be joined by one of our longtime faculty, Andrea Peterson. Andrea is all things paper, and we're excited to learn more about her practice and have her be in conversation with Shannon Stratton, our executive director. I'm going to tell you a bit about Andrea before we hop into our conversation tonight. First and foremost, my name is Sierra McKissick. I'm the communications associate at Oxbow, and Andrea is an internationally exhibiting artist and educator. Her work is multifaceted, exploring all types of paper fibers and processes, and includes paperworks, prints, artist books, and environmental installation pieces as well. She combines paper arts, printmaking, and book arts to make work that address human relationships to the environment. She received her BFA at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and her MFA in printmaking from University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. She has lectured and taught extensively, including at Oxbow School of Art, the Art Institute in Chicago, Sciola de Graphica in Venice, Italy, the Paper Museum in Steyermeuhl, Austria, Syracuse University, and Indiana University. You can find her work in several private and corporate collections. She currently teaches in the Fiber and Material Studies Department at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Everyone, please welcome Andrea Peterson and Shannon for our conversation tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Hey, Andrea.
Hey, thanks, Sierra.
Thanks, Sierra. Andrea, I really appreciate the fact that you truly made a bar.
What made it? This is Lou's night.
It's cool. Oh, you actually are at a bar.
Well, in my kitchen.
Oh, okay. Well,
tonight's bar is called
the Stainless Table.
It's the Stainless Table Bar. Welcome.
Awesome. That's amazing. I really appreciate that. I'm sorry that my family room doesn't quite look like a bar, but I decided to sit on this leather couch and maybe it would feel like we were maybe in a lounge.
Yeah.
You know,
need a smoke machine. You had smoke around you, even though I don't think they do that in bars anymore.
I don't think so, but we are joined. I have a friend here with me sitting off screen to the left. Maybe I could ask her to start smoking a cigarette, just blowing it in my face.
I could do that. That's
fine. Well, we heard the soundtrack that ushered us into the evening. What did you get us to play tonight?
Cecilia Evora. Now I'm tripping on it. This is just someone I have no idea how I got introduced to her music. I really don't remember. It's been so long ago, and just a beautiful voice. I mean, I believe it's Portuguese that she's speaking, but I think it's also a dialect. So it's just something that is incredibly beautiful. It just puts you in a whole different, because you don't necessarily need to know the words. I mean, when you hear a bird singing, do you know what they're actually saying? Not necessarily. You know, they could be swearing, they could be looking for a worm, but you know, it's also very beautiful, and we enjoy that. So
we started asking the soundtrack thing that we've asked for to usher people into the evening. That came, the first one of these Oxtails and Cocktails we did last January with Matt Morris, who designed our signature Oxbow scent, the Mary Kay. And, you know, that was kind of, I mean, there is still a pandemic, but that was still a point where people were maybe going out less than they are now. I mean, you couldn't really eat out still. I mean, people were mostly primarily at home, maybe with a few more people in their life. But part of the soundtrack decision was we were talking about what were people listening to, or what music was getting them through, or what audio was getting them through the pandemic. So is this music that got you through the last 18 months?
I think what's really interesting phrase when you say got me through, it's when we do talk to people are like, were you even affected? And I have to admit, we live fairly isolated from everything. We're not, speaking of the family in general, we're not really people who are in the summer, especially out on the town. So I mean, our studios are here. Both boys run their businesses off the farm. So it, in the sense of working, the only thing that changed up was I only teach at SAIC 1 day a week, and that was my ultimate change of online. So that was a whole new experience. But this music that I listen to is just life reaffirming, no matter what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's pandemic or not, I will admit I do miss Danny Miller's violin playing at Oxbow. So I mean, there's certain things that I actually can't hear because of the pandemic. More so, what I choose to hear during it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things. Live music just isn't. It's not there anymore, except for when Lupe plays the piano or Rye sings in the shower. It's kind of what I'm stuck with.
That's the live show.
Yeah.
Will you just tell, I mean, I will, thank you for everybody who joined us on a sunny August evening. All of these talks are archived and then available on our YouTube channel, sort of in perpetuity. And part of this project is about really archiving kind of oral histories with folks who have really special relationships to Oxbow. So thank you for everyone who's here. You may all know things about Andrea. People who watch this later might not. So tell us a little bit about where you live, because you said out on the farm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a part of your big picture relationship to the world and the environment in your own work.
Yeah. I live in Northwest Indiana. I'm about an hour and 20 minutes out of Chicago. I'm about 5 minutes from the from Michigan border. So we're right at the tip of the lake. That's where we live. And so we are literally, I don't know, 12 miles from the lake. About 12 miles from the lake. Not that we see the lake every day, but we're in the watershed. So we definitely are very close to the lake. And we have an 11-acre farm. We raise our own food and raise our own animals. We sell vegetables and we sell animals and stuff like that. So it's definitely a country setting. Both John and I studios are on location. That was the dream 24 years ago, was to move here to be in our own painting. Both of us are, I can probably say environmental activist. I feel like that's a really big title, and I don't feel like I fulfill that all the time, but I definitely strive for it in the way that I live daily. I'm not big on titles, but so I'm definitely the environment is all what my work is about. And when people ask me who my inspiration is, and I say Mother Nature, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And so that's kind of it. We're basically I would say we're pretty much off grid. This last 2020, we put in June, we put in a complete solar array that takes our studios and farm off grid. So the other day, storms went through. I'm sure you guys have been getting some storms at Oxbow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You see the best storms when you stand looking over the lagoon. My gosh, I've never seen more intense, beautiful gray clouds that look so deadly coming in. But so I understand that you guys probably we got storms and trees went down and power went out, but we had no idea that the power was out because our power doesn't go out unless it's nighttime. But then we still have battery backup. We actually have our own power plant, so to speak.
Wow. And that's all solar panel. That's all solar powered.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So you said you moved out there 20 years ago to be in your own painting. So your art practice came first before the farm.
Say that again.
Your art practice came before the farm.
So I'm gonna share something with you, Shannon.
Yeah. That's what you're here for. You're here to share all the things with me.
I never use the word practice. Practice came to being during my professional life. And first of all, I consider myself equal to a blade of grass. but I also consider myself equal to the grocery store worker, equal to, so I really find that, and they wouldn't say they practice what they do. So I work and I'm a worker. So I make artwork and I make things. And so when the practice really confuses me, that word, because at some point, is it classist or is it some point, um, I'm not practicing anymore, so I know there's kind of two versions of how that word is defined. And I am more than happy if someone else wants to use that term, but I'm uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a drink.
Get yourself a drink. Get yourself a bee's knees, or the daisy. Pardon me. Get yourself a daisy called the bee's knees.
I had a conversation with a lot of people how they see that terminology, and I understand. Okay, so if you're practicing, I think every person who hasn't achieved what they would claim as a professional goal, they're practicing because they're trying to build up aesthetic, they're trying to build up their work, they're trying to understand what they're doing, they're trying to decide if this is the path they want to take. So they're really trying things out.
Yeah.
A really great guy, Rob McClurg, amazing Oxbow, from the past. At Oxbow, many stories about Rob McClurg, but this one in particular, he was playing the guitar on the front porch of the inn, and I'm like, wow, you're just really good. How long have you been practicing? And he looks at me straight on, in those Virgo eyes of his, and said, I don't practice anymore. I play. And I told him, I get it.
Yeah.
And I understand what he means by that. And it just really stuck with me all this time.
Yeah, no, that's a great, I mean, that's a great story about a reflection on that term. I mean, also just having this conversation makes me think, like, where is somebody out there is due to write that short article or something about the adoption of that terminology into art making. And there are a lot of people who choose other terms. There are people who describe themselves as cultural workers or art workers, and I know people who don't like that terminology, and they don't want to be called an art worker or a cultural worker. I mean, it's such a it's a really interesting thing about the field of making things, where there is so much debate, I think, about the terminology. There's also of course, so many people who don't like the word craft. Do not refer to what I make as craft, or my practice as craft, or me as a craftsman. And then other people who are like, no, call me a craftsman. I don't want to be called an artist. It's a very
it's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. And it's I have that same sort of issue probably around the word curator, because for a long time that is the work that I did, but I have a studio art background. And I think when people have applied the word curator to me, even though I've held that as like a job title, I often am like, I'm not really a curator. I'm like more of a, I don't know, I like to orchestrate, I like to produce things collaboratively with other artists. Like, is that a curator? But or also just call me an artist, because that's what my background is, even if I'm not making things right now. So it's a very I think that self-definition around what it means to be some kind of a maker through an art lens is just always this exciting kind of space that people debate and push words around in. And what is good about it is that we can self-define that. So the farm came after making art.
Yeah, actually, I finished my graduate degree in Minneapolis, and then I was in Chicago. No, I went to New York. And then I went to, I was in New York working at Dudonné, which is an amazing facility there. I was there just shy of a year, missed the Midwest, and got a job actually in the Midwest. So I came back and then spent some time in Chicago. And then, that's basically all this time I'm working, making work, and, exhibiting and doing what I need to do. And then it was 1990, when was I born? 97? 1997. we decided, John does wood-fired ceramic art. And so he had a small kiln at his parents who used to live about 10 miles away from us, where we are now. And so what we decided to do was we need to be out of town so we can build a wood-fired kiln. And that was the time. And then I'm like, well, then I can actually create a larger paper studio to do more paper fiber research. So it all just kind of fell into place, right? And then I got pregnant the same year. So it was like great, because not that I wouldn't mind bringing kids up in the city, but I really love my childhood. I grew up in a tiny, tiny ass town in Wisconsin, and it was between 2 rivers, and it had 3 lakes. And so just being outside was what you did. You were outside all the time. I mean, that was playtime. Playtime was on the river sandbars. Playtime was catching frogs. I mean, there was no indoor. It was, you came indoor when you couldn't see outside anymore. And even then, you would go stand under the streetlight and catch fireflies. So, it wasn't, so that was the environment. I'm like, well, if I'm going to have kids, which wasn't necessarily planned, but it happened at a good moment, I decided I wouldn't mind living in the country to do that. So it all kind of worked out in its own way, appropriately.
Can you talk a little bit about when paper came into your life as an art form that you were invested in?
When I was in high school.
Oh, okay. So someone taught you paper making in high school?
No.
You got some paper wet, and what happened?
This is really gross. Just a second. Let me get a bee's knees. Bee's knees tender. All right. I had to order my drink before. Oh, did you see it? We have a guest at our bar, Margot Rita. She's at the end.
Hey, Margot.
You can't really meet. You gotta make your own friends, literally. So.
I have a cat named Margot.
I don't know what she's having. What is Margot having?
She's on the wagon right now.
Oh, I thought she was on the stool.
Or whatever you call it when you're not drinking. Off the wagon.
Well, that's Margot. She comes and hangs out.
You gotta show them up. I just cleaned out the garden.
Okay, we'll talk about the garden later. This is my show. Okay. So this might be a really goofy, boring story, but I'm going to make it really short. I had one of the most, I had 2 high school art teachers. One was a 3D guy, one was a 2D guy. The 2D guy, like everybody has probably experienced, was so burnt out, should never be in school anymore, but wasn't sure probably what to do with his life at that point. The other guy was really young and was new on the scene. And so I was taking drawing classes from the other guy, who was actually really good at it, but he just, he just got tired. He was done with high school kids. And the other guy, the 3D guy, was like really fascinated, because I was like, well, what if I just do this or this and this? And he just let me off and do whatever sort of I wanted to do. And I would come back and be like, well, I'm thinking about this. And so I was like, well, I don't know how I got a thought in my head, but basically I'm like, well, what if I just made my own paper? He said, well, what do you think you need for that? And I said, why don't I just try recycling something? Why don't I, and then it figured out he could get me a blender. I'm like, okay, let's do that. So I said, I'm going to go to the girls' bathroom and get all the paper toweling that they've used. What a gross idea. But he didn't stop me. He's like, all right, go ahead. Because I'm like, well, I'm not going to use new stuff. I'm going to use, the stuff they've already.
You went into the garbage can.
I went into the garbage.
Oh, got it. All right. Yeah.
But, yeah, that started a long history of dumpster diving. But anyway, so I went in and I started playing around with it. And I feel like at that moment in time, and I look back at that as understanding my creative process. I stopped what I was doing and I looked at him. I said, I'm not ready exactly for this process. I think I know that I want to do this, but I don't understand this all yet. This needs to go on the back burner. And he said, okay. And so he put away the blender and I threw away whatever I was creating. And then I went on to do sculpture. And then I went to undergrad school at my first 2 years. I went to University of Wisconsin in Oshkosh because I played the French horn. And it was I was playing the French horn, so I was in an orchestra and I was taking art courses. This is extremely demanding art field, but two extremely demanding art forms.
Yeah.
So I'm like, here, I'm starting my second year and I'm just like, first of all, completely exhausted. And I had a part-time job. So here I am working away, doing all this stuff. You know, you're young, you have lots of energy. And went to my orchestra leader and I said, oh, before that, so someone was coming to talk about papermaking in the fibers department, or in the fibers area where they did fibers. And I went in and sat in on the lecture. I thought it was a lecture and I thought it was a demonstration, but it was neither of those. And it wasn't really much of anything. But I do remember that I asked the instructor, I go, I'd like to try some experiments with papermaking. Would you mind if I use some of the equipment and, just cleaned up, And she said, no, not a problem. So, so the first thing I did was like, oh, I'm going to make onion skin paper because onion skin paper is made from onions. Well, it's not, but so what do? I go get a whole bunch of onion skins with onions, blend them all up, throw them into a vat because I'm like, I really want to work with plants. And, pull the sheets. It literally, it looks like beautiful white compost. I mean, basically that's what it looks like. They're all mushed. But when you blend an onion, thank you. When you blend an onion, fresh, raw, it's in the water, the onion smell, it's in the water, which is good because then you're not crying, but it's soaked into my hands. So here I am, and I had to finish up what I was doing because I was in an exhibition up on the third floor and I had to kind of clean up and then just go up there. It was in-house exhibition. So I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll be fine. And so I just cleaned up everything, and then I'm like, and my hands, I mean, like the most intense onion smell you could possibly imagine, because all the onion smell went into my hands.
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, fuck, what am I gonna do? I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna keep my hands in my pocket. I'm just gonna make one ring around because the instructor says she's gonna want us to be all there. I'll just leave. I'll be fine. And then I'll go. So I get up to the 6th floor or wherever the hell I'm going. And on the elevator up, someone's like, do you smell onions? Do you think they're cooking somewhere on a lower floor? And I'm like, oh fuck, I'm just a little kid. I'm 19. I'm just totally,
Covered in onions.
Totally embarrassed. I'm sure I was totally embarrassed. And then I get up there and I walk around the exhibit. It's a small space, but I just reek like onion. And one of my instructors, who actually, I don't know how he got to Oshkosh, but he came from New York, and he was this wild guy who always promoted performance before performance art really existed. And so I'm walking around the show. He stops right in front of me. He thought I was doing some performance piece, and he's like, "Huh? How are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I gotta get out of here, TC." He's like, "What's your hurry?" He just started. He's like, "So, do you smell onions?" And I'm like, "Oh, TC, you gotta let me go." He just started giggling, and he knew I was somehow doing something bizarre, and then I left. But I also stopped at that point, and I said, "This isn't working. This isn't the time. I still enjoy. I don't have enough information. This isn't the time. I have other things I got to finish out." And then I went to the school, the Art Institute, first fall semester. Hand paper making was listed as a course, and I took it. And I took papermaking every single semester after that with Rick Hungerford. And Rick was the one who introduced me to Oxbow. And I went for a TA, as a TA 2 summers, 86. Let's see, no, take that back, 87. So summer of 88, probably summer of 89. I was there, and papermaking was the whole month of July, and 1 week courses, which were insane. So every week we had a new group coming in, but it was a blast. It was my introduction to Oxbow, and it was amazing.
Sealed your love of papermaking, clearly.
Well, finally I was like, oh, I finally met the person who can guide me through what I need to learn, what I need to do. And then I just pushed the material even beyond his course. He was a great mentor in that fact. When I'm like, well, I really want to do this. He said, well, here are some suggestions to get there technically. And I would just push the material. And yeah, it was just, so he was my first papermaking teacher. That's who I actually learned papermaking from. And it made complete sense, and I was ready for it. Loved it.
Do you want to share some images? I've got other questions about papermaking, but maybe I should do them with images up.
I don't want to keep people long, so if anybody wants to, like, I don't know how long this is supposed to be, but
it'll come to its natural conclusion. Don't worry.
I do want to share my refreshment with people. Would you mind?
Oh yeah, definitely. We sort of didn't get to our refreshment.
We're excited about other things.
I know. Yes, tell us about
the
DAISYs.
Daisy. So we're in COVID, right? We're still in COVID. Who knows how long this will last? But last year, my youngest, Lou, turned 21. And what a drag to turn 21 and be in quarantine, right? So I told Lou, I said, okay, what we're going to do is up until your birthday, we're going to make new drinks, and you're going to learn how to make new drinks, because he was excited about it. So we've basically been doing that for 2 years, making new. And Lou is very good at it now, as you heard him shaking in the back.
Yeah, he seems like a talented bartender.
Yeah. And he has made me a bee's knees here. I'm sure you guys can see this. So the daisy, historically, the daisy is basically a spirit, a sweet, and a sour. And the daisy, sometimes soda and citrus, it just depends on maybe what part of the country you were in when things were changing or later. But basically, the daisy is a bartending basic. And whatever alcohol you have, whatever sweet you have, whatever sour you have, you got a daisy. So the market is a daisy. But all I can imagine is people at Oxbow in 1910 or 1918 or whatever, and they're drinking daisies. It's whatever they got going in the still, and then they're adding their sugar and their sweet and sour to it. And the bee's knees is the drink I chose, which is a daisy, which is basically gin. It's a honey syrup with the honey from our bees, and what else? Honey syrup and lemon.
Syrup, lemon, and gin.
A lemon. And then Lou gave me a little mint leaf garnish.
2 ounces of gin, like 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, and I did a little more than 3/4 ounce, probably closer to 1 ounce of the honey syrup.
Yeah, and then we topped it off with a little club soda, because I like that on ice. And the bee's knees was pretty much created during Prohibition. And the reason was because the bathtub gin was so harsh. Yeah. They needed something to cover it up. But after one, it's fine. So you're doing way good. But that was one of the reasons for creation of the daisy, was because there wasn't really now you can get really amazing rums and whiskeys and what have you, but that didn't occur. You kind of got what was being made and anywhere. And so the daisy was a way to actually, soften the blow, right? It's made the drink, made the spirit, whatever it was, taste a little more sour, more sweet, or more palatable, basically. And thus the cocktail was born, right? So
really, it's anytime. I mean, it's really the trick. If you're just stuck with some really low shelf liquor in your life, just throw some honey and some lemon in there, and you got yourself a decent cocktail.
You're good to go. So it's I was telling Shanna this last night for the rest of you, but it's also very important the glass that you serve it in. And here it's not so much as the shape of the glass. Like sometimes margaritas are in a particular cup, or martinis are in a particular cup. My particular cup is a Jerry Catania, and Jerry was the bee's knees, and that's why I chose this refreshment. So wherever you are, if you're drinking coffee out of your water bottle, I'm going to cheer Jerry Catania. And I thank you all for coming so we could do this all together, because what a guy, right?
Cheers to Jerry. I wish I'd met him.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much fun. When I get to Oxbow next week, we can sit and chat about some of the goofy shenanigans Jerry and I, and actually him and Rick did more of. And you know who probably has really good information is Danny Miller. You talk to people who've been there, like it had stories that are probably like, you know, I feel like I'm just a youngin', and yeah, just amazing. Jerry was the guy who would be like, "What do you need? What can I get for you? What do you need?" And then anything, he'd bend over backwards. He goes, "Why? What's happening? Why do you need something?" You know, he was always there, Johnny on the spot, very helpful, always willing to be like, "Okay, you need me to run across the meadow with boiling hot lava gas and dump it in this cauldron." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what we need to do." So, because we would do all sorts of fun things, and that was part of it, or just, you know, party decorations or whatever. I remember one of the first parties I went to. I was a Rick's TA, and if any of you who are out there have been to Oxbow and you're in the dining room, I believe this print is still hanging up. It shows a lot of people in insect costumes. Mm-hmm. And that was the first. I'm actually in there, in the print. My costume's in there, and that's I actually don't even remember what Jerry came as, but it was one of the artists that he was bringing as a visiting artist came as a bed bug, and basically what he did was strap his mattress to his back, and it was, he couldn't barely fit through the door. It was in the Scanlon. Oh my God, those were the days, right? Oh my gosh, so much fun. My costume needed a 50-foot extension cord. I was a lightning bug. So I was blinking on and off, which I'm surprised I didn't get shocked or anybody else didn't. Or dancing, I'm sure it was crazy, but it was a lot of fun.
Any pictures out there of this bed bug and lightning bug costume?
As far as I know, only in my memory and that print on the wall.
Okay. This is why we have oxtails and cocktails, though, so that we can hear like exactly that kind of story, and it is forever saved on this video.
Crazy.
As you probably know, Andrea, Oxbow is a place that has a lot of lore, and a lot of it is like oral. Yeah. And that is I don't know, just one of the kind of exciting and complicated things about a place like this that's as old as it is and hasn't necessarily been, I mean, actually, to be honest, a lot of places are pretty poor at archiving themselves. And, but Oxbow has for those listening, Oxbow has a certain amount of stuff archived, but a lot of it, the bulk of our archives are from the founding years. We have a lot of materials from Frederick Fersman and from the Ruprecht family and Elsa Albrecht, but like kind of the other 100 years or other 90 years, is like actually pretty spotty in comparison. And so, we've been doing a lot of different kinds of projects to capture those oral histories, because it's just a place that's got so much lore. There's so much about Oxbow is about the way people tell stories about it.
Oh yeah. And stories they do tell. And it's a magical place. I mean, I don't have to tell anybody who's already been there that it's a magical place. There's nothing like it. You go and you experience, and if you let yourself open up, you can change things about who you are. You can introduce new things to who you are. everybody who leaves has changed in one way or another, and it's and it's something that holds dear to them. Even if they never are able to come back again, they're like, oh yeah, Oxbow, I was there.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I find that before I came back to work here, I was somewhere in North Carolina and talking to an artist and her husband who'd both been at Oxbow, 25 years or more prior, and they hadn't been back, but they had exactly that kind of response, like, oh, Oxbow, that's like one of my favorite places in the world, and but it had been like a couple decades since they'd been here. But it was still something that they really, had made a really deep imprint on them.
Yeah, connections. You may have a deep connection with the place. It's what place can you really, really go and just bare your soul and be like, yeah, okay, come on, we'll hang out with you, and let's do something crazy. Let's wear lampshades all night around the fire pit and talk in German. Yeah, let's do that. It's hard to put in words. That's why people are like, oh yeah, Oxbow, I've been there. And that's right. Usually all that's needed.
Yeah.
There's a connection. You have a connection with those people.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Oxbow, I've been there. That's probably a good bumper sticker.
True.
We should consider that. So yeah, do you want to show us some of your work? And I mean, a big part of it seems like your work is continually informed by your relationship to the environment, which is something that Oxbow is important to the experience of Oxbow, is the environment. So I'm leading everybody in this direction because I know that's some of the content
that we should be showing. I'll make it brief, but I will reference it definitely to Oxbow and about. I think that's one of the reasons why I've been so attracted to definitely teach there year after year, is to really engage people in an outdoor studio. A lot of people feel, I think, more so than not, that they need to be in a four wall clean space, and that's not true. Not necessarily. You really are, wherever you're able to work is where the work is made, and whether that's in the woods, on the canoe, at Lake Michigan, that's and I think once people and that's what I try to get my students involved in, is that it's not always right where you're standing in your studio. That's not necessarily excuse me, where the work's being made, and you need to put yourself into a place of experience to have either thoughts or ideas, or take that studio on the road with you and be much more activated and in that space. And maybe you take your sketchbook and you never write anything in it, but the whole point is you went beyond and thought within. And that's really what Oxbow happens to be about. I encourage people, I'm like, don't bother sleeping at Oxbow. What's the point? You can do that when you get home. You need to be, you need to see it at all hours of the day. You need to be laying in the meadow. I can't tell you how many, it's probably now in days or maybe years, how many hours I've spent laying in that meadow, looking up at all those stars, and just, and having the most crazy, amazing conversations with everybody from students to, of all ages, which is the beauty of Oxbow, accepting anybody of any age as an equal, as well as teachers, just like, having people tell me, and me as well, life dreams and how things are happening and how they want to change this or that, or how they want to continue what they're doing. And, so nature is a powerful, powerful thing in our lives. And I think people forget that everything we touch, everything we hold, everything, this little mouse, everything has come from nature. Everything. Without nature, we're basically, well, without the sun, we're nothing. So basically, this planet doesn't need us. We're just here.
Definitely doesn't need us.
It's just we're taking advantage of everything that is there. And some of the times we're giving back and some of the times we're not. And that's really what my art is focused on. So let's clip through a couple images. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. Are you ready? Is everybody ready for this? Okay. I'm going to do this and do this, and I'm going to do this. You see that?
Yes, we can.
You see two big logs in front of you?
Two big logs, yeah.
Good. Ooh, all the daiquiri. I'm ordering a drink. Okay. These weren't done at Oxbow, but I want you to always think that I'm referencing the natural environment in that place, especially if you've been there. The beauty of Oxbow is it's woods, it's meadow, it's sandy beach, it's dune, it's water. I mean, you got everything on that little peninsula. You're not missing anything, and it's pretty amazing. Trees, I have come to find out, are very important, obviously important to our world, as well as very important to me. These two logs are approximately 60 inches by 60 inches each. And as you can tell, they are mirror image of each other. Unfortunately, a couple years ago, the electric company decided that they'd rather have the poles on the roadside instead of cutting across farm fields. So basically, it wasn't on our side of the street. It was on the opposite side of the street where 150-year-old trees were basically hacked down. And I would say, fortunately, these trees were probably close to full grown. As you can see in the center of these logs, the little crack, that's year one. So when a tree decides its time is up, every tree has a life cycle. It rots from the inside out. The first year is the first to go. It's been there the longest, and thus. So as we watch the electric company pretty much take the trees down, we asked to have a couple slabs of these from our neighbor, if he wouldn't mind if we had a couple slabs from this largest tree that was there. And just an amazing tree that they're just not there anymore. They did this all the way for about 2 miles. So they took out everything in its path. And these were the oldest trees, and they're the ones we saw every day. They're the ones we drove by for the last 22 years. So,
and sorry, how old did you say these were?
These were about 150.
Wow.
So, if you think about yourself, and I'm like, okay, I'll be 55 in September. So these trees were 2/3 grown, but they are massive by the time, did I say that right? They were 2/3 grown by the time that I reached my age. Or did I have that right? Whatever. Obviously more. When I was born, sorry. They were 2/3 the size when I was born. And that's 1966. And this area wasn't that developed in that time frame. So I don't want to dwell on this too much, but you guys get the idea. So they were incredibly beautiful, as you can see by the external shape of the tree. They're aesthetically pleasing. You can also see the chainsaw marks that are imprinted. So these are cast paper into a log. The log has been coated with ink, and one of the inks has had kind of a red burgundy color, and the other ink is actually more of a silver white. And then one was cast with white paper pulp, and the others were cast with black. And so it's to mimic this idea of memory, the mirror of time, just this profound moment when these slabs were one, and now they are apart, and they will always be apart. They don't exist anymore. We did kind of a ritual bonfire with refreshments around the bonfire, and let them go. But I thought I really wanted to record their existence in reference to everything that's around us, as a memory, as something profound that we just, I think as humans, just kind of let go very quickly. Like, does that electric line really need to move? things aren't necessarily considered. We become this dominant species when we're really not the dominant species. Um, and I think we take advantage of our power. And I think whether you get all that from this piece, it's not really necessary for me. But the pieces for me were about this mirror of time and how to reflect on how we spend our time. What do we do with our time? Where's our time on this planet? What's our life cycle? And how is it reflected within another? So here's another piece. This is this is a series of works that I did, drawings, kind of a, as you can tell, a contour drawing. Trees that are in Warren Woods is a amazing climax forest that was donated, preserved by the Warren family, and it's just over the border in Three Oaks. A climax forest means it reached its final stage. And so once again, I took large pieces of paper. I brought leaves back from specific trees that had tremendous, the area that they're in is really sandy dunes. So you might have been to the Warren Dunes, but there's also the Warren State Park, which is, but Warren this Woods. Is Warren Woods State Park, where these trees occur, and they're enormous. And a lot of them are beeches and maples. There is an occasional, as you can tell, this is an oak. And so the beeches that I have drawn that are in part of this series have now fallen over and are over 300 years old. These, because a beech lives a very long time. If you take the path from, obviously, the path to the crow's nest, you will see amazing beech trees.
Yeah.
And people have, as you can see, carved their initials in it. And I did too, because how can you resist? And my initials and my husband's initials probably were carved in that 20 years ago. And as it grows, it explodes. It becomes this has been happening for eons. People have realized what a beech tree does, which it heals its skin back, and those markings become obliterated. But the beauty of the beech that I think touches everybody's soul is they realize that this tree is forever. And usually what you see is Susie loves Jimmy, Susie loves Susie. You see these sort of comments about, this dedication of human to human. It's not and people realize, whether they realize about the beeches or not, I'm sure they do, because they see a beech marked 1954 or even 1939, because dates are also put amongst those initials. So anyway, in this woods, there are several different trees. And what I wanted to do was capture, these are actual leaves that are placed just below the surface of, it's a double couch. So what that means is there's one sheet of wet paper, and then there's a second sheet that's applied on top, but it's very, very super thin, so that these images, these leaves look like a ghost image, or when you see them in person, you actually see the leaves. So you know that there are leaves there. Here, it could almost be something else because it's digital. And so once these pieces of paper were made, I went back to the woods with the pieces of paper and actually drew the trunks that they came from. The idea for me was this connection of earth to sky. These trees connect to the ground. And because it's a sandy dune, they reach out, they claw out into the ground, they grab hold, but it doesn't look violent. It's more of this sort of disappearing act. Like they just kind of move out and go in, like there's a continuous flow. And it is a continuous flow. And then these leaves that have gathered information and food and what have you, drop to the ground around the tree, feed the roots, feed the tree, and it starts its cycle again in the spring. So, if you rake your leaves, don't. You're actually taking away the food that these leaves have gathered to feed the roots through the next generation of growth. But anyway, so it's really like the memory of the summer before, and the years before, because leaves can accumulate for years and they build this amazing food for the tree below. But it really is this connection to an upper atmosphere, to an upper area that humans can't really reach. I mean, trees are phenomenal, right? And they can grow extremely tall, just depending on their species and for incredible lengths of time. Anyway, this is a piece that I wanted to bring about, once again, environmentally minded, which are all the works. And if anybody has a question, just jump in. I think Shannon can handle it. I don't know how that works. So
yeah, you can leave questions in the chat box is a good way to do it.
So thanks, Lou. This is awesome. Oh, so this is a daiquiri?
Yes.
So you guys, I don't know if you know this, but because we're learning all about alcoholic drinks here, because Lou's 22 now, the daiquiri was invented in Cuba. And it was invented by an Englishman who basically had rum and lime juice, pretty much, and probably sugar, because that's all it is. And it's shaken. And the daiquiri is the name of a mine, a copper mine in Cuba. And that's how it got its name. Anyway, a little bit of trivia at the stainless steel bar.
Oh, loving this trivia.
So this nest was the instigator for this piece. This piece is called Before We Were Born, and it's called Nest. So I did several pieces in this series called Before We Were Born, basically reacting to the fact, like, we weren't always here. Things were looking good when we weren't here as humans. Nature was making it happen, evolution, the pollen grain was created, everything was functioning beautifully. And it still can with humans within reason, but things have gotten a little out of whack, as we all know. If not, read the climate change report. So basically what we're looking at, this nest, I came back after teaching from one summer to the next, and on the patio, when I was cleaning the patio, it was really windy that day. I happened to be the first class that June, and this blew out of the eaves. And by investigating it early, by close investigation, I found the daylily fiber that we were using the year before, the shredded paper that a student artist was using to create work, and there was some other indicator that this bird was actually utilizing some of the materials from the class to build the nest while we were actually having class. And I was intrigued by this sort of piece that I didn't get to see until the next year. And the bird obviously could care less about us, but it really made me feel very connected that we were able to create a home or help, assist, as human as I'm trying to make it. But basically, I'm sure the bird thought like, oh, free material right here by my nest. Cool, which is totally what I think a human would think too. But anyway, that's where this nest, and it's a beautiful piece. And I'd love to show you, Shannon, but it's actually at an exhibition right now, so I can't bring it to camp next week. The glass, which I don't have as beautiful picture of at the moment, the glass base is created by another amazing Oxbow person who was there for years, Becky Weimer. And I went to Becky and I said, I need you to create something for me that'll hold this nest, that'll look like a tree, and have this power of glass being the idea almost of fragile, but at the same time showing strength. And she was amazing. She said, I know exactly what to do. And she made this amazing piece. And so this base is one of Becky Weimer's works, being a glass artist and ceramic artist. She was for years in the kitchen at Oxbow and has went on to do amazing things in the Michigan area. But I always look at this piece and I think of that's the power of Oxbow, is being able to go over and talk to somebody and being like, do you want to collaborate on this work? Or do you want to swap for this? And I have so many artworks and so many amazing things from people that I collaborated with on the moment and swapped or bartered or however it may be. And my house is filled full of things that have carried those memories of being able to have experiences with those people. So this is one of them. The book is actually, for those people who know, it's a thin, crispy abaca. It's a non-bearing banana plant. It creates a really thin, crispy sheet that's translucent that kind of reminds you of like an eggshell, so to speak. So the drawing is really about things that would occur in nature and naturally break down and become part of the soil as we think about the circle of life. These are a new series of prints, and I know they're really dramatic in color for what we're just looking at. The prints are really talking about an intimacy with nature, and I'm going to go through these really quickly because that's the most I want to say about them. They're actually very, very fresh, but they're really macro and micro, thinking about it that way, but I'm really thinking about it more so micro, and they're a combination of paper pulp and some printed image. Pieces are 24 by 36, and some you'll see some paper pulp and obviously the finished printed image. Some are printed in as a 2 edition, and some are printed as a singular piece, such as this. So there's a combination of abaca and paper pulp. Like for instance, in this piece, the ink is just from the top down, the ink is the turquoise kind of dark blue, the red, little spot red. Then there's pink that goes all the way down until you see the blue at the bottom. So pulp is really underneath the blue. The top, there's some white stripes. There's brown, that's some brown pulp, and there's this sort of pink middle section that's the more like maroon, that's paper pulp. So this combination of paper pulp and printing has been a big focus of my work in the last few years.
Can I just stop you there real quick,
Yeah.
Andrea? So when you're talking about the paper pulp is you've dyed it in advance, or there was something like the pulp had a natural coloring to it?
In these pieces, I am pigmenting the pulp. So I'm using a pigment. I am working with natural dyes right now. I'm doing some research on those, but we're not going to talk about those as much as pigmenting pulp. So when I say like the brown pulp, that's pigmented brown. It's all the pigmented areas are using cotton rag as a pulp, which is a byproduct of the clothing industry that I'm using. And then anything is pulp right now. And then the underlying piece happens to be the very thin translucent abaca. It doesn't mean to be translucent and thin. It just happened to be the bucket of pulp. In this case, the bucket of pulp that happened to be sitting in my studio that I could make several pieces at one time.
Okay.
So with this in mind, I went ahead and made these pulp pieces first. Then basically was not sure what I had done. Stuck them in my drawer, and 6 months later, I just printed them this last February. And when I pulled them out, it was kind of almost reliving the experience from the summer and being able to finish them at that moment, or what I feel like bringing them to a point of completion that really talked about this sort of connection with nature in this sort of intimate way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So this piece obviously looks really huge, but it's not. It's just big on the screen. But this has a partner piece. So everything was made in addition of 2. It just so happened that some of the pieces I decided to combine as a singular work. This is a large work that John and I worked on for an exhibition that we had a couple years ago called Inhaling the Universe. And the whole exhibition was focused on this idea of what we're losing. I think that's an honest claim to it right now. I don't know if I could have said that then, but I really feel like it is about what we're losing. So the sheets of paper are 30 inches by 30 inches, and they go from the top row is white, the second row is a gray, and the dark row is the last row is a charcoal, so top to bottom. We did these enormous cyanotype, as you can tell, on them. And this piece is really called The Disappearance of Time. And it's the disappearance of time, which can be seasonal, but it can also be a much larger look at how things are disappearing for us, how life just isn't, I don't need to tell you people how rough things are. I mean, the planet's on fire, or people are drowning. It's one or the other. And we're in rough shape. If you don't think so, or you're not sure, you definitely should just read the climate report. And then after you read that, you should read this book. I don't know if you can see this, but I'll tell you later in the chat. It's called The One Straw Revolution by Masano. How do I say this, Lou? Masanobu Fukuoka. I'll spell that out later. But anyway, I mean, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. I mean, it really is. But there's really hope. So this large piece is to kind of be enormous, to kind of reflect on that things are disappearing, and what can I do before things disappear, I guess. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. But things are disappearing in front of us as we speak. Two larger works off to the left and right. Lou, do you think you could stop for a second? You're going to have to stop. We have these two large pieces. They're 4x5. It's a stretched abaca and flax. So basically, it's hard to explain, but for the most part, it's a 2x4 structure, a wooden structure, where pulp has been laid as sheets. Actually, the sheets were made, and then the structure was put on, and the wet sheet is wrapped around and let to dry, and it dries tight like a canvas. That's the best I can explain it. These are the holes are from burnt marks in which I threw pennies all over the piece to by chance, and created the burnt holes. And the piece on the left is called water, and the piece on the right is called air. So they're inhaling the universe, air and water. And it's really this disruption that's happening with our air and water. I don't know if any of you know this, but I'm sure it's a fact some of you are aware of, that the Amazon rainforest produces 20% of the world's oxygen. 20%. So I want you to go into a room and take out 20% of the oxygen as quickly as the Amazon. Anytime you buy anything that has Amazonian wood, where it's not from a regenerative farming, we're just burning it away. The Amazon is so important to the health of the entire planet. We're gonna have another conversation about that later. But basically, these pieces are to reflect on how we're burning holes into our water and into our air web that we've made for ourselves. Last piece I'm going to show you. This is part of the exhibition from Inhaling the Universe. And at the last minute, John and I wanted to create these 4 table-like structures that are 4x8, or excuse me, 4x4, to kind of get people involved with the textures and the substances that we take for granted that are around us, that are so important to soil regeneration, to the existence of how we live. And that's the sand, the charcoal, clay bodies, and straw. And we really wanted it to be tactile. And you can see right in the very front piece, people's fingers. So people were able to physically engage into sand and to charcoal, and the clay before it completely dried had finger marks and all sorts of rubbings in it, and the grass on the end. So this sort of kind of textural feel of the world around us, and almost have this secondary awareness of kind of bringing the materials indoors that makes it sort of an extraordinary sort of event, and gives them a whole new awareness or idea or thought that there's sand out there, there's charcoal. These things are what help build the soil and are part of the soil and are important to our world. So, oh, this is my last piece, sorry. Just back on the worn woods. So I just wanted to say I created this artist book that did a ton of drawings about the bases, all these amazing sort of configurations of roots that were all over the woods. And there's sort of a transformation of information that goes from roots to the top of the tree, and how it comes back again, and how it comes all over, and this sort of union of earth to sky. And these pages are 22 by 30. It took me months to fold 1 1/2. It just was a big scary thing to take a drawing and fold it in half. But anyway, and then you'll see the natural fibers are used on those pages as well. I know I've gone way over time, so if you guys want to talk about anything or have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, you can all leave. It's okay.
Well, nobody has to leave just yet. I think I just have a couple, maybe quick questions. I have a couple questions, and then, I'll let everybody else sort of chime in about questions they might have. I guess my first question is about paper as a medium. I've noticed, just sort of anecdotally, I guess, that there are a lot more young artists interested in paper making again.
Yay.
Yeah, yay.
Keeps me employed, right?
So, and I shouldn't just say young artists. I mean, I should say artists in general. I know a lot of artists who are painters painters and other disciplines that have been doing something else that are like really interested in learning paper making in the last couple of years, So I just wondered if you had any personal reflections on that, about like why paper as a media might feel really satisfying right now, or might really contain a lot of like natural meaning, in its form or material that is really compelling for people today.
Well, I'll tell you something that's really funny. I mean, I think it's funny, but I have to tell you, I think paper is such a quick result.
Mm-hmm.
People are impatient, and paper making, you have your result pretty quick. I mean, when you do ceramics, make the pot, bisque the pot, fire the pot, glaze the pot, refire the pot. You got a good week or 2 weeks, depending. You got to have a lot of pots to fire the pots. So when you if you're obviously in a paper class or you're having your own paper experience somewhere, you're able to make the work, dry it, and you have it pretty much bing, it's done. So there's this immediacy that's very attractive. There's also, it's non-toxic, which is also very attractive to people who are like, well, I just want to work with something that I'm not gagging all the time, or there's no smoke, or there's no, there's that. There are people who are very concerned, like, okay, I want to still be able to use lots of color, but whose dog is that? You have a dog?
That's Lady. It's my dog. It's my dog. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, she's
right,
just saying she wants to go for a walk. That's what's happening back here.
Time.
Exactly. Hello.
So,
but yes, color.
That's part of it. I think pigmentation. You can achieve, for people who like to do it pigmented. You can see, the thing is about paper is it's so versatile. You can do sculpture. You can make work look like paintings or pastel. It's so malleable. You can make it look like rock. You can make it look like stone, and it weighs nothing. When I was in New York, I worked with this she's not young, this older artist who's probably she was my age then, but she was like 4 feet. I don't even think she was 5 feet tall. Tiny woman, just tiny woman. And so at Dudonné, we would work with all kinds of artists who would come in, paper would solve the problem that they're working on. She did bronze sculptures. Well, she had to hire people to move her sculptures around her studio. And she said, what's so amazing about paper is I can make the same size sculpture. I just hug it and I can walk it across the room. So in a sense, there's this sort of beauty that she could achieve metallic looking surfaces, but not have to bronze anything. So there's also this malleability of material that can do so many and look like so many other things. I mean, I think that's it. It's magical. It's a magical substance.
Yeah, and I personally have been dying to take a paper making class. I've got
there's one next week at Oxbow.
No, I'm on my summer vacation on the last week, but I'm going to show up in a paper making class soon. So I have been really dying to take paper making, and I think one of the reasons why I mean, there's some other artists I know that have been making paper, and I come from a fiber background as well, so I've I've been around paper making and paper makers for a while. But I think one of the things that started to feel really attractive to me about it was thinking about ways to like metabolize my life into, like, I don't need all these, 60 some odd notebooks, daytimers, sketchbooks that I've kept my whole life. I don't want to throw them out. I don't want to read them cover to cover. Like, how can I sort of think through what it means to have like already digested the world through writing and note taking and sketching over like, you know, my lifetime, and how can I work with that material? And so paper making really obviously was something that I'm like, oh, this is, yeah, just like pulp it, just keep remaking your work, or keep, you know, reusing things potentially, you know, I mean, just until you can't. And so, yeah, I guess given your, you know, obviously, you know, very authentic, you know, concern with the environment and with material use, you said you have a long history with dumpster diving. Is that, you know, like something we can say about paper? Is it helps us rethink, like, you know, the permanency, like how permanent or impermanent something has to be because it can always be repurposed?
I think what's really interesting about paper is people think that it's not a serious material. And I'm going to go back on that statement and say it in a better way, but let's do it like that. Because what do you get your coffee in? Paper cup. What do you look at a magazine in? Paper. So there's this really utilitarian use of paper fiber and paper pulp that they're like, well, how could that actually be a serious art medium? It's just paper. But in the fact, it's actually pulp. And how you take the pulp and utilize it is really the changer. Obviously, if you take pulp and make it into coffee cups, you have coffee cup. You take pulp, you make it into fine art, you have fine art. So it's really just you take clay, you make it into a cup, you have a cup. You make clay into a sculpture. So it's really one step back. And so people think of it as paper because people can't imagine it as pulp, because if you've never made paper, you can't imagine it as pulp because you can't. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. You don't know that there's another, you don't really recognize the
step before, right? So I think that's part of it. Is I think when people start to realize that pulp is, you know, and it's also, pulp is easy to come by. It's not, it's fairly cheap. It can be, I mean, you can make paper, meaning, or artwork using pulp from cracker boxes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you need to determine your end result. Okay, if you're going to do the Constitution of the United States, if you're going to make a paper that needs to wrap around the Constitution, because the Constitution is actually on parchment, which is animal skin, which is not a good thing. So what you need to do is protect it. So I know the paper makers that actually made the paper that surrounds the Constitution, you need to make it archival, because you want that Constitution to outlive the rest of us, all of us, the time, you know. So there's serious considerations about how that pulp is made and used and manipulated, what the fiber is, what the content within the fiber. And so the thing is, taking that pulp and determining its end result is really the art process, or really the process that determines if it's art or not, so to speak, or, you know, if it's a coffee cup, if it's more utilitarian, you know. I mean, when you make a magazine, I mean, the magazine is all about ink, not really about paper. It's about ink. It's about how much information can you cram onto that little tiny thin sheet. So it's 50% paper pulp and 50% kaolin. Okay, there's more clay, or at least equal amount of clay in that magazine sheet than there is paper pulp, because kaolin absorbs so much more ink. The paper pulp just holds everything together so you can turn the page. So basically, it's really, really, what do you want to do? And then can pulp be your, you know, it's the same thing that's happening with mushrooms, which is pretty exciting. What do you want to make? Oh, I want to make styrofoam for packing material. Okay, well, this is the mushroom you should use, and this is how it grows. Now I want to make mushrooms for remediation, or I want to remediate the soil. Okay, this is the mushroom you need to use, and this is the substrate you need to put it in. So, I mean, it's really about what do you want to do, and then how do we get there, which is really the problem solving that happens in my class at Oxbow, because people are always like, I can't believe how diverse everybody has gone in the directions. And it's always a constant comment. And it's because it's like, everybody doesn't think the same, you know? You know, there's somebody who's going to want to go in a sculptural trajectory, which is fine, or several. And then there's some people who want to be like, well, I'm trying to make something look like it's not there. And there's that, there's that case too. So then it's like, okay, well then you should maybe try this material in this direction, and you're going to try this material with this sort of apparatus, you know. So it's always sort of like, you know, I have a wide breadth of understanding paper fibers and materials, and I always really push that paper fiber experience. So, you know, I've worked with, I can't tell you how many fibers I've worked with in the field, everything. At Oxbow, it was amazing. John Rossi, toast to John Rossi. How could I not toast John Rossi? Hello. Besides letting me use the bad boy every summer, which is a mobile party unit that is amazing, that I cook my fiber underneath. He is always like, in June, they usually have a society that comes out and picks the garlic mustard. Well, we've made paper out of that garlic mustard several years. He's like, "You got it? Do you want it?" And he's like, he's such a sweet man to be able to like, well, what stage is it in? I don't want too much work for you guys. He's like, no, we'll bring it over in garbage bags. And it's great. So we've been able to, on the spot, take the garlic mustard, make it into paper, and people make it into work. It's amazing. You know, it's like, so I'm always trying to bring as many doors that open those doors for my students within the paper fiber. Like, you know, you could be doing this or you could be doing that. There's no. It's always a yes. You just have to know which direction to go down, which path that you need to go.
Yeah. That's a great sort of place, I think, for us to end up, but that there's always a yes for paper.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's a lovely conclusion. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? We've got about we have 8 minutes left.
Oh, thanks for staying so long. I just feel like we're chatting away, but
no, this is exactly how it's supposed to go. So Andrea, when we first started doing this, we thought they should, you know, we were doing them for an hour, and we realized that actually they were best when they were about an hour and a half, because there was so much kind of storytelling and different sort of things to talk about. That
I got one more story about Rob McClurg. I wish Rob was listening. I'm going to send him an email to listen. So this was my early years of teaching at Oxbow. I hadn't been there. It was early 2000s. And so, you know, I credit Jerry and Rob for really teaching me about Oxbow spirit and being amazing. So Rob, being a fellow Virgo, which we bond immediately. But so what works best for the paper studios that I arrive actually when 2 days before. So I usually get there a whole nother day before, because the paper studio is locked into a closet that's usually chipmunked or moused. And there's a lot of excessive cleaning that has to be done before anybody can even touch that material or that equipment. So I get there, it's Saturday, I'm doing my cleaning with all my amazing TAs, which I wish I had my list of TAs right here. Oh, Chad, Garin, Jordan, Claire, Zena, Amy, Carrie, Chris, Colin, Sean, Andrea, Amy, Sandy, Allie, Zeke, Alta, Melanie, and there's probably more. Oh, Heather and Lauren. Okay, besides, and then maybe others. So I'm there with my TA, and my TA, we're done with the day. Everybody goes to bed. And apparently, which I didn't know about because I'm just there and people don't know me yet, and it's early, and Rob's there, and it's, I don't know, it feels like it's early June, but I don't know a lot of the fellow. I just got there. So it's brunch the next morning on Sunday. It's early in the morning. I always get up early. I get down there, come to have my cup of tea, and you know, watch people start to arrive for brunch. Well, apparently there's a panty raid the night before, and it was all the female fellows taking all the males' underpants. And then I don't know if they strung them in the meadow. They strung them somewhere. Well, apparently they didn't go to Rob's cabin. And so Rob came to brunch wearing his underpants on the outside of his shorts just to prove that he had underpants and that you could find them. It was just,
It sounds like he was crestfallen not to have his.
oh, it was just so funny because
Underpants
he's just a comic. And like, Rob has his tighty whities, and it's just, and I was like, there's a man walking around, and I hadn't learned about the patty raid until after I'd seen him walking around with his underpants on the outside of his shorts, which I just thought was hilarious. It was totally Rob. It's totally Rob. It was so funny. And thoughts, that's the note we should end on.
That is, yes. There is no yes, there's no no, there's only yes, and panty raids. Classic Oxbow panty raids.
Oh.
Andrea, thank you so much for doing this tonight, and especially for like the extra special like home bar that you set up tonight, which is really amazing. And I hopefully will inspire future Oxtails and Cocktails guests to like sit down and make something like that happen on their end. But it's a real pleasure to get to talk to you this way and hear your stories and hear about your work. And I mean, I still had some other questions, but I'll save them for when we meet face to face.
Sounds good. Thanks everybody for coming. I hope we haven't bored you to tears.
I don't think so. If people are up for it next month, we are going to be talking to Mark Pascal, who has taught printmaking at Oxbow for many years and is currently working on a project for us around our 1967-1968 print portfolio that was made to raise money for Oxbow. So that's what's up next. You can see all of these Oxtails and Cocktails talks on our YouTube page. You can get at them from our website. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thanks. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.